Okay, so I actually got some really good information from Inman Solar yesterday. Hang on, I'm gonna let somebody in here. The industry is sort of self-regulating. The investors who are funding these privately developed solar farms that are then enter into a PPA with Georgia Power, it's in their standard lease agreement that they have to use as required by the investors, that they have a decommissioning plan.
Well, that's good.
And there's very little concern that they're going to go out of business in 30 years because they're making money on their PPA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Greater chance that they probably sell it than go out of business, to your point. Well, why don't we have everyone introduce themselves on the call? Julian, why don't you start and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're involved with right now. And let's get a more thorough introduction from everyone on the call.
Well, I think everybody here knows me already, but this is our third session doing this now, and we were a little jerky on the first round, and last week was a lot smoother, so hopefully this week will be even better. But as far as the new folks in the room, we've got Allison and Charlotte, so maybe you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, Charlotte, tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe you can pull your camera down slightly because we're only seeing from your nose up. There we go.
So I'm Charlotte, and I've been in the environmental space since 1996. I started out working for the Georgia Forestry Commission, and I've worked in forestry for a really long time in about 15 different states. I've written forestry reports for the Secretary of Agriculture. I did the legislative forum after Katrina, and I've done commercial sustainability as well.
Great. So the Georgia Forestry Commission, you said?
I did the first forestry marketing guidebook, and the Forestry Commission is partially funded by the Forest Service. So they put the guidebook online, and it was the first time anybody did that. And so other states, because I don't know if you know this, but at least back then you weren't allowed to use the word marketing if you got federal dollars. And so after that, other states wanted to figure out how to do it. And so I was sort of kind of an expert in that lane.
Yeah. And did you work down in Forsyth, Georgia at that office? Is that the Forestry Commission or the association? I get those mixed.
Yeah, they are closely aligned, but they are different.
Is the commission the state agency or the nonprofit?
I was working across all of Georgia.
Charlotte, you're coming in and out with
all the way up to Tennessee and all the way down to the. I'm not sure what's going on with my link.
It might be if you take your video off. It might be better for your audio.
Yeah, stop your video, Charlotte. Let's see if it improves your audio.
Okay, is that better?
Your face, though.
Yeah, we'll miss your face, but we do want to be able to hear you. Can you say again, if the association is it the group in Athens on Millage Avenue, or is it the group in Forsyth, Georgia?
Actually, they're in Macon, Georgia, and it is the commission. And so yeah, there's an estimate that I've worked with over 300 tree groups. So yeah, that's what I was doing.
Becky was right. That fixed your audio, so we'll have to go without seeing you. Allison, is it Allison? Is that your first name, or is Laura your first name?
Allison is my first name.
Okay. Okay. Introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about what you do and what you're interested in.
Great, thank you. I've been working in the sustainability field in Atlanta for 10 years, primarily in the green building industry. And I'm in the inaugural MSEAM class with Becky and Charlotte at Georgia Tech. So we just, and Julian there. And we just finished our courses for the semester. And this summer, I'll be doing an internship with the city of Savannah in their sustainability department, working with Dr. Kim Cobb's Smart Sea Level Sensor project. So I'm pretty excited about that because I grew up on the coast of South Florida. And so I'm really interested in sea level rise issues and the community engagement around that. So I get to work directly with that this summer. I'm really excited about that. And hopefully that'll really help steer my career in the direction of local government resilience.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, of course, Tybee Island is probably the place that they'll send you the most, but there are a number of barrier islands. If you have a chance to hop on a DNR boat or another boat and go over to Ossabaw Island, which is very close to Tybee, or just down to St. Catharines. They have a professor trip down there that Georgia Southern does to St. Catharines. There's a lot of exotic animals down there because it was owned for a while by the New York Zoo. And so they treated it like a Noah's Ark, and they would breed animals that were, you know, bordering on extinction down there. And some of them, you know, remained, like there are lemurs and monkeys in the trees and exotic deer.
That's awesome.
There's some, that's on St. Catharines. And so you have to get permission to go beyond the high tide line. Georgia law allows you to go on any island up to the high tide line. But to go further, you've got to have permission unless it's like a heritage preserve. Ossabaw is a heritage preserve, I believe. So if you buy just a Georgia hunting license, it allows you to walk around on Ossabaw because it's owned by the state, and that license gives you the right to do that. So anyway, you're going to have a great time down there. I'm so glad you're getting to go to Savannah.
Yeah, me too.
Welcome to our call. Crystal, would you like to reintroduce yourself to the group today?
Yeah, I think I know everybody on here now. I'm Crystal. I'm from GGC, and I'm an environmental science major. I think that's it, because I know Charlotte. I worked with Allison, Becky the last 2 times, Jamie. Yep, I know all of you.
Great. Becky, you're always so gracious. Thank you for that. You know, I really love your approach to public policy and just your graciousness. So thanks for being here today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you. That's such a high compliment. I'm Becky Rafter. I'm with the MSEAM program, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. My staff member, Jamie Barber. Jamie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jamie Barber. I'm the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Manager at the Public Service Commission. Been in this role almost 11 years. So some things I work on currently are the income qualified tariff. Georgia Power just recently filed their customer connected program, which is their customer sided. And we're gearing up to issue an RFP for 800 to 1200 megawatts of utility scale. So we've got a lot going on right now.
Great. Sol, why don't you introduce yourself, and we're going to have you actually go first today and talk a little bit about some of the things you didn't get to talk about on the last call, so some recycling issues and other things. Would like to have you kind of kick the conversation off today.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Echols. Yeah, so my name is Saul Haroon, and I'm wear numerous hats. I'm currently doing an MBA program at the Scheller College of Business at Georgia Tech, and I've got a fellowship with the Ray C. Anderson Center on Sustainability and Microgrids. So I'm doing some research on that. Graduated previously from Georgia Tech's master's program in high performance building science at the College of Architecture, and before that in electrical engineering. So I've kind of dabbled, hopefully more than just dabbled, but been around in different things from electrical engineering to looking at consumption and demand and patterns from a building perspective, and now from a kind of an economic and sustainability perspective at the Scheller College of Business. And then I've been working in solar for some time now. For a good few years, I used to work at Suniva, which was at that time, a Georgia Tech's success story. And then I've also been working in electric vehicles for some time as well. So kind of different areas from solar power. So I work with Georgia Power and Duke Energy in creating microgrids, large scale utility microgrids. A lot of my solar work is indeed large scale utility stuff, as well as some commercial. Then I've worked somewhat in electric vehicles and now in high performance buildings. So I was actually helped design the Georgia Tech Living Building, the Candida building. I did the modeling on the load side of that, and then I was the electrical engineer on record for designing the PV, the photovoltaic canopy on that building as well. So, so very grateful to be here, and grateful to bask and share in the Georgia Tech community right here. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what you're doing for the Ray C. Anderson Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys want, I've got like a 2-minute, 3-minute presentation. I can walk you through and give you a little bit of background on what microgrids are as well. Would you guys like me to share a presentation online right now? Julian, can I share? Let me see if I can bring up my screen to share that. And I'll make it quick and relatively painless, hopefully. So, okay. So give me 1 second while I bring that up. Okay. And yeah, okay. So have you guys, I think all of you have heard of microgrids to some extent, right? I imagine, right? So we'll go into a little bit more about what that entails. And let's see if this one is it. So no, that's not it. Sorry, I'm struggling to bring it up here. Just give me 1 second. So it's always hard to find stuff when you're looking for it. Okay. Okay. Don't know if it was on my other machine or not. So, yeah, I think, good. I found it, I believe, right here. The grid. No, that's still not the right one. So.
While he's searching, and let me know, give me a thumbs up when you find it. Right? Actually, just share the screen, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Julian. Why don't you guys just continue while I look for it? I'm so sorry about that. I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
Right now.
So I was just going to say a word about the Ray C. Anderson Foundation. They've invested some dollars at Georgia Tech. Obviously, Ray Anderson was an industrialist. He essentially imported the carpet squares that you see in office buildings. He brought that concept to the U.S. and then eventually just began to green his manufacturing process to create recyclable carpet, to use safer chemicals, to actually recycle old product, and doing it in an effort to kind of change manufacturing, not just himself and his own business, but others. And so he he wound up bringing a lot of people along with him and helping to influence that. I think he passed away in 13, maybe 12, maybe even before that. But the proceeds from his estate went mostly to his foundation in a sub foundation called the Ray. And so they do a lot of charitable projects, a lot of them that are environmental in nature. So, are you there? You found it?
I found it. Yeah, I have it now. Yeah, perfect. All right. So perfect. Brilliant. Okay. Let's see if I can share. So Julian, what do I do to share my screen? Right here. There it is. I think that should do it. Okay. All right. Can you guys see my screen now? Julian, is my screen coming across?
We can see it fine. Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect.
If
Yeah.
you could enlarge the, for those of us who need enlargements,
Myself
just make
included.
it just the slide, that would be really helpful.
Okay, let me,
Thank you.
does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
You can see it now? All right. So this was a fellowship that I'd received. I started with the Scheller College of Business last semester, so it's relatively new in September. And then at that time, I applied for a fellowship on sustainability, presented my case. A company, a small company, a new startup had approached me to look at the feasibility of commercial microgrids. So these are, you know, commercial microgrids the size of, let's say, a racetrack or a Waffle House or something along that, you know, could basically provide power and resiliency for a medium-sized operation, a shop that sells food or services and the like. And that's what I've been working on for some time since then. And I actually completed the first round and it was relatively successful. So I'll just give you a quick overview of, first of all, what is a microgrid? What were we trying to achieve in all of this? What was our approach? What are some of the observations and where is the future work going to be? So really quickly, a microgrid is an opportunity for a cleaner, more reliable, and more resilient energy grid. Want to make something clear, it does not eliminate the infrastructure of Georgia Power or Duke or any of those. It works in conjunction. So it's a cooperative effort with the utility, which will allow to not only for the commercial operator, for the business to bring some resiliency for them, but also perhaps even feedback into the grid if that's permitted. So when you have Sandy, the storm that happened in New York or New Jersey some time ago, being able to support that grid as well. So the definition of a microgrid is really quite simply, it is an intentional power grid island within a community or business, and it features 4 things: renewable energy of some sort, battery storage, smart loads, and an intelligent control mechanism that ties it together. That last key part, that last thing is really important. So it's not just about slapping on solar panels and hoping everything will work, but rather having some sort of control or intelligent infrastructure that coordinates all of this, like a conductor. And you can operate either in conjunction with that main grid or even independent of it. So here's a picture of what a typical microgrid would look like. And EV charging can be a very integral part of this as well. So you can see you can have existing generators, you can have renewables, storage, as well as electric vehicles too. So combining everything that Commissioner Echols really enjoys as well. It's like providing intelligence to power, to electricity. And I know he's particularly passionate about electric vehicles, and they are an integral part of microgrids, or can be. So the problem statement was quite simply looking at medium-sized standalone buildings and seeing how can you address their power and energy needs. And power and energy are kind of related together. Power is the rate at which energy is delivered, and energy is your consumption over a period of time. So a business like a racetrack or Waffle House, they want to see how can they save money and energy, but also how can they add resiliency? So how can they survive a brownout or a blackout, for example? And so what what I was trying to do, what I'm trying to do is seeing what mix and match of microgrid resources could really address those two concerns in a cost-effective manner. And seeing that I am at the Scheller College of Business, money and economics factors a really important part of it. So it's not just about coming up with a buffet of different technology options and slapping them together, but really doing so in a very cost-effective way. So money is definitely very, very important. One of the tools that I've been using is called HomerGrid, and you can actually put in real rate structures from Georgia Power, from anywhere in the country, time of use, all of that good stuff, and actually look at the complete rate structure breakdown, because that's really, really important. And then you can model the engineering parts of it, see the trade-offs, and you can optimize and see for actual real bills. So we received real bills from Racetrack, from Chick-fil-A, from all these different companies for a full year, put them into this and see what sort of energy consumption, what sort of patterns are emerging from that. So this is a basic schematic. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this, don't get too scared. It's pretty straightforward. Here's the grid with the rate structure. So this will be Georgia Power or wherever, whether it's California on the Northeast, etc. And then you've got your loads, actual real loads that we feed into this tool. And you have your photovoltaics, your renewable energy, you've got your battery systems, and of course you've got your converter between the two buses. So we can actually model all of that pretty well. And it's a really, really powerful commercial tool to do that. Here is a real rate, energy consumption from Chick-fil-A in San Diego. So I'm doing this from different parts of the country, from the Southwest to the Southeast, to the Northeast, to the Northwest, and the center, because they are different climates and they have different needs as well. So we're trying to see what happens as you go from each one of them. So their bills in this case was $123,000 a year, and which worked out to be 27 cents per kilowatt hour. For those who are not familiar with that, our rate structure is really competitive. Commissioner Tim Echols and others have worked to make sure that our pricing structure for electricity is one of the best in the nation. We have very, very competitive rates right here. And as he has worked on putting solar onto that grid, is doing so in a way that doesn't really cost the end consumer, doesn't really raise our rates. If anything, it's actually hopefully reducing it. But in California, it's a different story, obviously, as you can see. So putting all that in the tool, we then, oh yeah, before we get into that, one of the things that they want to do is something called peak shaving. So commercial operators get charged not only for the consumption of energy throughout the period of time, but also if they exceed a certain amount of power load, and that's called a demand charge, gets lopped onto that. And so what they're interested in, sometimes the demand charge can be quite a bit more than the energy charge. So a company's interest is not only to keep their consumption down, but perhaps more so to keep their demand down, so they don't get charged these exorbitant surpluses or exorbitant fees for that. So you want to kind of smooth out. What a utility would like is that utilities want actually their power to be as boring as possible. They want everybody just to have a steady consumption. That never happens, but with a microgrid, you can potentially achieve that. And so you actually become the utility's friend in that sense as well. So you can see if you can fill in the valleys, and if you can lop off these mountains, this is your power demand over a period of time, let's say over a day, and you get a kind of a steady level, that is a great thing. Utility will be happy, you're going to be happy, and you really can reduce your bill, even if your energy consumption remains the same, which is the area under this curve, but your power has now been redistributed. And through storage and solar, you can achieve that. Not always the easiest thing to do, as Commissioner Tim Echols will tell you, but it can be done with intelligence. And that's where a microgrid can come in really handy. And so here, where various models, things that were simulated, business as usual is shown in the blue. And basically, they are paying 27 cents per kilowatt hour. This is actually real data, for a total of $123,000 per year is for their consumption. That's business as usual with no solar, no storage, nothing. The cool thing about this tool and others is that you can model what happens if you just put solar, what happens if you just put storage, what happens if you put solar and storage with this particular rate structure. And you can model different rate structures as well. So you can mix and match and see if I have a time of use here, if I have whatever rate structure you can put into it. And you can see that with storage and solar, and no surprises there, 150 kilowatts with a 200 kilowatt hour battery pack, their levelized cost of electricity went down to 21 cents per kilowatt hour. That's not too bad. That's not too shabby. And they're still connected to the grid and still consuming power from that. But because of the reduction of demand, as well as some of the energy consumption, they're only paying $76,000. And so if you go down here, then there's with a renewable fraction of 40, almost 50%. And these are really, this works in California because their electricity is very expensive, particularly. It's certainly a little bit more difficult down here to justify this, but they're getting a 5-year simple payback with a internal rate of return of 18%. I don't know about you guys, but that's a slam dunk in my book, my books right there. It won't be so beneficial here, but it will still be somewhat competitive as well. And I'm exploring that further and further to see what happens. But this shows you here, business as usual is the black line, meaning that you have no renewables and you're just consuming power from the utility. You put in a microgrid and you can see this is what happens. And you end up being in the black, as it were, right? After some period of time, around after 5 years. So your investment has really paid off in that sense. So future work, we're looking at different rate structures. I'm looking at rate structures throughout the nation, and particularly, different quadrants, and seeing what mix and match of these resources would work well to meet a good economic story for microgrids. So I'd like to just end with this slide. It's one of my favorite books. Actually, it was kind of before my time. It was published in the 70s from a great economist called E.F. Schumacher. And an European, British, and German. He wrote a book called Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered. And he wrote right here, even today we are generally told that gigantic organizations are inescapably necessary. But when we look closely, we can notice that as soon as great size has been created, there's often a strenuous attempt to attain smallness within bigness. I just love that. But thank you guys for any comments?
Yeah, let's have some comments and questions. There were a couple on the chat. I know I had asked one about, does using the San Diego example, and you kind of answered it with that rate of that payback graph. It does make it more valuable where electricity is more expensive, right? Because you get the quicker payback. Would you say that it is more valuable in California than Georgia to do something like that?
You're absolutely right. Here's, however, where it gets a little bit messy, and that is what value do you put on resiliency? So if you have refrigerations, let's say, if you've got, like I was working with briefly with a company that does scientific instrumentation, and they do environmental lab testing and stuff like that out just inside the perimeter. This was some years ago. And it's just like near 85, inside 285. And they said if they lose even a brownout for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they have to go back and recalibrate all their instrumentation. I said, wow, that's harsh, man. I guess maybe over 2 hours or something like that. So you can put a value on resiliency, which otherwise, it would be more than just saying, oh, I'm saving demand charges or I'm saving energy charges. So at that point, your payback could be even more so. Right. In other words, for the other things that are beyond just what you are paying to the utility, what value do you put on other items as well? Once you and you can incorporate that in this tool, but that's a little bit more difficult because you have to come up with values for how much do you value resiliency. For this round, I did not put any value on resiliency. So even when I don't do that, you can see in California or other parts of the country, it's really great. But now solar has come down considerably. We're well under $1 a watt easily. I heard, by the way, in the Middle East, there's one of the largest solar power systems going in. It's going in, and it was bid out at around 1.25 cents or 1.4 cents per kilowatt hour. That's an incredible LCOE. I mean, prices of solar have just plummeted, and our avoided cost in Georgia, I believe, is around between 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Is that correct, Commissioner?
That's correct. Mhm.
3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So we are grid parity in many parts of the country already because of the cost of solar has just gone down considerably. But your point is well taken, that this works better where the cost of electricity is much higher. But if you have issues of brownout, I mean, we've got pretty stable power here. Or if you attribute more to resiliency and actually give it an economic value, then your economics can work out quite well as well, even here.
So where was that 1.4 cents per kilowatt hour?
I have to Google it, but I believe it was in the Emirates, somewhere around there. It could be Doha, it could be East Saudi Arabia or somewhere, because even Aramco, and I worked with Aramco a few years ago, believe it or not, I know, the company that makes $1 billion a day, or did, revenue. They were saying, you know, they need to get into renewables. The largest oil company in the world saying, and then I was actually teaching them about renewables, part of a course that I was doing from Georgia Tech, teaching on advanced solar. So I know Saudi Arabia and other countries around there are waking up that oil is not unlimited and that they need to get into. So you might find it, Julian, somewhere. When I find it, I'll share it with everybody. But even here in our own backyard, solar has gotten really, really competitive. And it's just fantastic now.
Allison, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was curious if you had any detailed information on what it costs for the customer. Like, I'm not sure if this is more significant cost for the operator or the end user.
So these are the costs that the customer is actually paying, so on their bill. So in this case, Chick-fil-A, for example. So is their question is, what are they paying per kilowatt hour? In terms, these numbers are all what they're actually paying. So I'm not sure I understand your question. What is it? Are you talking about install cost, operating cost, the effective cost of electricity over 20, 25 years, or what is it you're looking at, I guess?
I guess like maybe this initial capital column, like what is rolled into that?
Oh, that's everything. That's a turnkey. So now solar costs are very well understood in terms of permitting, soft costs, hard costs, everything. We've got it down to an art and a science. So yeah, that would be, in this particular case, it's a 150 kilowatt system with 200 kilowatt hours, initial capital of $300,000. So yeah, and that's assuming battery prices are coming down, so which they are, as Commissioner Tim Echols will attest, that electric vehicles are really driving battery prices to come down. For example, PV pricing, the holy grail for some time was $1 a watt, completely installed, everything. So if you have a 150 kilowatt system, that would cost you $150,000, $1 a watt. The holy grail for batteries is around $100 per kilowatt hour. And we're getting there slowly. So if you have 100,000, so for example, a 200 kilowatt hour pack all installed should cost you $200,000, right? So, or even less.
Are you saying that's what's required for demand response is solar plus storage?
Typically, yes, because the thing with solar is it's not a definite resource. I mean, you cannot control it. You're at the whim, you're at the mercy of the sun, as it were, at the clouds, basically. But when you start putting storage or batteries in, what you can do is, like in the morning, or at some time when the customer is not consuming as much, you can store that excess energy in your batteries, and then you can discharge from your batteries to kind of level out that curve, level out that line of consumption. So this one right here can be See this chart right there? Your goal is basically to get a straight line across in terms of consumption. Now, that's not going to happen, obviously, because at the middle of the night, people are not consuming energy, right? So you want to make sure your batteries are, so at night, your consumption will be down, but at least during the day, if you can get a relatively straight line during the day, that would be really good. Yeah, so batteries, it's very hard to do that with just solar alone. You kind of, you know, the next big thing is storage, and that's utilities are seriously. So I'm working on some microgrid projects with Duke Energy particularly, and they are doing some serious storage in the megawatt hours, basically. So that's not the utility scale, but the idea is pretty much similar here as well. And then you can do what's called energy arbitrage. You can play games in terms of buying at a lower cost. So you can charge your batteries at night, for example, from the grid, and then sell at a higher cost during the day. So even without any solar, you could actually make money with just storage alone because you're shuffling energy around. It's all based on the price. The cost of electricity is key in all of this. Any financial analysis without considering the actual cost of electricity is a meaningless financial analysis. So that's why a tool like this actually takes all of that into account, which is really good.
So you're talking about the value of resiliency, and I know that over the last 7 years at the commission, we've had a number of different consumer groups or trade groups talk about the value of solar and to want to attribute to solar these other attributes like resiliency or like you know, a lower CO2 emissions, which would provide some additional health savings. How do you quantify that? But it's been something our commission hasn't really bought into in terms of, and I'm just giving you, I'm not really giving you my philosophy on this. I'm just more trying to state some facts here that we haven't looked at these other attributes and said this is worth a quarter of a cent, or I mean a few of them, yeah, kind of maybe with like replacing equipment and other things like that. But when we get into some of the social things, we haven't put a dollar amount or a penny amount or a fraction of a penny amount on those. And I know some places have done that, right? Can you speak to that a second?
Yeah, I believe NREL, you guys might be familiar with the great lab out in Colorado called the National Renewable Energy Lab, and they work with the DOE. They get funding a lot from the DOE. And I think the Northeast particularly, they have come out with reports that actually are trying to attribute or put numbers, as you said, Commissioner, to more of the soft aspects, the more social aspects, in terms of resiliency, in terms of carbon, or I guess ozone depleting, or CO2 or methane, and all of that sort of stuff. So there has been some work, and some districts have decided upon a certain metric or a certain value and said we're going to attribute this much dollars for every ton of CO2 that we avoid because of this. And sure, you can do that, and there isn't any agreed upon standard, I think. I mean, we know the generation of CO2 or gases, let's say, from each of our generated, whether it's from coal or from oil or whatever, but kind of coming up with a standardized metric is a very difficult thing. So I did not include any of that in this analysis at all, but putting that in will only make the numbers look better, right? So, but currently I'm just using sheer costing figures from avoided costs, from utility bills, and what's the cost of installing? What's the actual cost of putting in all this solar and batteries too? But I don't know of any standardized method to do this. Now, California has been doing some, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts as well, but I don't think there's any agreement. Is that right, Commissioner? I have not seen any agreement or standardized method of doing this currently.
Yes, no, there's not. And I often say, you know, to folks that regional politics, history, availability of natural resources, all of these kind of impact this overall energy philosophy that any number of officials chime in on. And it just so happens in Georgia, since we elect our commissioners, the commissioners are somewhat more independent, right? We don't, if we were appointed like Florida or North Carolina or California, then I think there would be a stronger tendency to follow the governor, whoever appointed you, right? That tends to be what appointed officials do. And we don't have the legislature really weighing in on our energy that much. They created our energy planning process in 1991, the Integrated Resource Plan. I was actually listening to the audio from that debate today, just kind of going back and remembering that. It hasn't been amended since 1991. So that's kind of kept the legislature out of it because they haven't amended it and changed it. They could if they wanted. And so our commission has a lot of autonomy and independence to be able to make what we call policy decisions. And I mean, we could give other attributes to solar or batteries, and it could happen one day. Jamie, do you want to say a word just about this, because you've been front and center with this, and you've heard me talk about how that solar in Buckhead at the end of a congested circuit would be worth more than solar, down in Taylor County, Georgia, because they're not using it there. And we haven't really valued it more in Buckhead than we have anywhere else, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The commission does, so I don't know if you're familiar, we do have a renewable cost benefit framework, which is value of solar basically. And, but one of the things that Georgia Power, and one of the other things that some of the solar advocates has advocated for is giving value to the REC, hedging value, and some of the other distribution avoidance of O&M and stuff. But we currently have some of those as placeholders. We do not, Georgia Power has not valued locationally where you're putting. Now, distributed generation, of course, gets T&D benefits that utility scale does not get. But other than that, we don't value projects. Their projects are hurt depending on where they're located on the transmission system. If it's overloaded, Georgia has put a lot of projects in certain areas. Taylor County to come to mind. We had a lot of solar projects go there, but we do not currently value that. There are states that do it. Minnesota, I believe, is one state that does. I have done some research on it with Tom Stanton with NRI back, but it's been a couple of years ago, so we haven't really, I haven't looked at it since then. But that is something that I want to keep up. That is something I know Commissioner Echols is interested in, and I think that's something hopefully we can get to sooner than later.
That makes sense. And I think Dr. Marilyn Brown, she'll have a lot to say about this. That's kind of more her area of specialty with regards to climate change and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes up with like hosting capacity. I know some states are a little bit more open with letting people know, where projects can be sited. I know it's a discussion at NARUC when we go about, I know Nevada has done some of this stuff, but I think it's still something that we're looking at. And I think the concern of Georgia Power is anytime you look at siting a project somewhere, that is that moment in time, and it's going to change. And so the load's going to change, the resources are going to change. And so I think they're a little bit hesitant to do that, but there's things that we're going to have to look at down the road to help, to know where to site these projects.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me ask you, the solarized programs that we're seeing are more and more the participants who decide to take advantage of the bulk pricing are getting batteries. And so
Yeah.
can a home be considered a microgrid even if it's still connected to the grid? How does that definition work?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so going back to the definition right here, there is a notion that your normal operation in a microgrid is actually connected to the utility grid. So that is the normal operation. The microgrid has the intelligence to understand, it has an intimate understanding of what your loads are in a way that the utility will not, unless they have smart meters and the ability to go in and actually control your equipment as well. But a microgrid should do all of that. So I think what you had in mind is like the Tesla Powerwalls. That's what they're doing. My good friend Montana Bush, who's one of the chairs or the directors of the Solar Energy Association, he's been doing a lot of work with the Solarize, I think mainly Solarize Athens program, and there are many others as well. So he's telling me there's been a huge uptake on storage. And you're right, people are seeing, because storage has come down quite a bit in cost, the benefits. So I think a lot of people go on time of use, right? There's the EV time of use with Georgia Power, where it's really beneficial at night. So they'll charge their batteries with, if there is no sun, let's say, at night, and then discharge during the day. So yeah, to answer your question, you can consider it. I think you're seeing the evolution of even house-based systems, nano-based, nanogrid systems, if you will, to become more like microgrids. But the key difference between a real microgrid and just simply putting storage and PV on your house is intelligence. The more intelligence you have and the more ability you have to control your loads to meet demand and all of that sort of stuff, the more it really is a microgrid. Now, in our rate structure on residential, we don't get charged demand charges, right? It's mainly commercial, like power factor, harmonic distortion. None of that really matters or are we charged for on a residential. The only charge we have on our bill that really matters is kilowatt hours. That's your total aggregate consumption on a residential. It's an entirely different story on a commercial, of course, or industrial. They get charged all these other fees as well, which is where a microgrid can really shine. So I think you would have a really basic microgrid for residential, which is just being able to program it to be able to take advantage of the rate structure and time of use. But most people probably don't have very intelligent loads. But now with Alexa and all these different systems where with relays, they're controlling their lighting. Alexa, turn off the lighting. Oh, good, mine's still on. Okay, all of that sort of stuff. So then that's migrating more and more towards a microgrid and towards the other concept called the smart grid. You guys have heard of the smart grid too, right? And a smart grid is kind of a utility approach, and a microgrid is more of a bottoms-up consumer or end user approach. And the two will meet somewhere in between. And we are talking about coordinating and living harmoniously between the utility and the microgrid. A microgrid is not meant necessarily to entirely replace utility. For anybody to put enough storage and power and PV to meet 100% of their demand will cost them a tremendous amount of money. So when people come to me and say, hey, Saul, how much, get me off the grid, I say, no, don't do that unless you've got unlimited pockets. Try to meet 50% of your load at least first. 80% is doable. Beyond that, you're going to spend potentially a lot of money, because you have to then plan for all those surges. For those few hours in winter or in the middle of peak summer, you have oversized your entire system just to meet that. That's not a smart approach to do it, right? You want to coexist with the utility, and that's what a microgrid does.
So I want to ask you, I posted the greenmountainpower.com link in the chat. Casey Boyce and I talked the other day on my radio show about this program where the utility provides batteries to its customers that want to rent them for a monthly fee. And essentially helping to facilitate these microgrids. I'm intrigued with this idea. I haven't talked to Jamie about it yet, but I'm intrigued with the idea that maybe the utility could actually foster microgrids and make money from it at the same time. And I would be interested in hearing someone like Becky, who lives in this co-housing arrangement that they have over there in her complex, if for $30 a month or $40 a month additional, if you could have the utility install the battery and you make payments on that battery through your utility bill, is that something that you would be interested in doing? Maybe Saul, a comment about that program, if you've heard of anything like that, and then Becky to kind of give an idea of what you think your in-town neighbors would tolerate in terms of a monthly fee for a battery.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Actually, a few years ago, I worked with Radiant Solar, James Marlowe and his group, and we did one of the first trial microgrids. This was actually quite a few years ago with Altamaha Power. So that's near Dublin in Georgia, Vidalia, I think it is around there. And then we designed a microgrid for them to experiment. And I think the EMCs have been pushing something like this for some time as well. Oh, did we lose Commissioner Tim Echols? Okay, sorry. No, okay, wait.
I'm still here.
My bad, sorry. My screen minimized there. So yeah, I think it has to be done pretty carefully. I mean, we'd have to see what value, you'd have to promote the value and have buy-in from the clients, from the customers, and say, yeah, okay, well, this is what I can get from something like this, whether it's time of use, I can do energy arbitrage, or I can, survive a brownout, anything like that. So we'd have to kind of put together a package of the value benefits, the value proposition, and something like that, of course. But I think that your idea has a lot of potential for sure. But are you referring to any specific programs that have been instituted since then for promoting microgrids? Is that what you're referring to, Commissioner?
The Green Mountain Power current program they have that I put the link in the.
Okay, got it.
You can click on. Yeah, you can click on it if you like, and then let's go to Becky and just get her opinion on this.
Sure. I'm right with you, Commissioner Echols. Last semester, Allison, who's on the call, and another classmate and I did a research project about solarizing rooftops in Valdosta, Georgia. And what we found is it really wasn't economical because the battery is so expensive. And so an idea that we had was to see if a whole little neighborhood could share a battery and be like kind of a microgrid. And ever since we did that paper, I've been thinking about the community here. And I'm like, I wonder if it's possible. I'm sure people wouldn't, some people have solar here. We don't yet, but my partner put $1,000 down on the Tesla tiles. So I was like, why'd you do that? Like 3 years ago. Anyway, we have not heard back from Tesla about that. But I was thinking, if it would be possible to have a shared battery and be like a microgrid that people pay, like you're suggesting, a certain amount every month to be able to sort of finance the cost of the storage, while, we also are able to work with different programs with Georgia Power or our own budgets to be able to have solar on our rooftops, just to make it economical. So as long as I'm understanding you correctly, I think we're on the same page, and I think that would be an amazing project. I think I've even thought about bringing it up in one of our general business meetings here to gauge people's interest. But I didn't even know if it was necessarily possible. So I haven't moved anything forward.
So the Altamaha project, and I didn't know that James had done this with Altamaha EMC. Was it successful?
We lost track of it, so sorry, because I get involved in so many different things, but it's worth following up with James and Jamie Porges, who's now running Radiant Solar. So I'm not entirely sure. I think, I wish I could give you an answer. I don't know.
Julian, why don't we invite James Marlowe to be on our next call? and to kind of give us the evolution of that Altamaha project. And I think Saul is right that EMCs probably are going to be more open to this because they tend to, I don't know, they tend to be very consumer centric with their members and wanting to, they don't, you know, they don't seem real threatened by a lot of creative things like rebates for solar and rebates for insulation. And not that Georgia Power is, but Georgia Power is big, and the EMCs are more nimble, and they're able to maybe to do a kind of a boutique program, you know, like this, to stand it up real quick, and where it's more difficult, you know, with a large entity like the power company. Hey, why don't we, you know, we're coming up at the, coming up on our hour, and I wanted to just give a chance for some of our other folks that, you know, are on the call, if they want to chime in on this. Maybe Crystal, any thoughts on this topic today, or Julian, either one?
I'd just like to comment real quick that if you're a tinkerer and a hobbyist like Sol and I both are, you can make your own microgrids. We've both done it quite a few times. My office now is not actually in a solar panel shredder. It's in a large 2-bedroom camper, and I actually have a luxurious panoramic view of the woods surrounding you all. So if I ever look distracted, it's because there's an interesting bird landing in the tree out front. Anyway, the camper has a 12-volt electrical system, and being in the sort of the salvage hustler business, I secured 14 kilowatt hours of sealed lead acid batteries for half of scrap value, and planning to connect all of those to the large 12-volt power supply that this camper has. So I'd be good for a week with lighting. I've converted the lighting over to LED already, and we're working on a plan where actually the backup power that's in this camper will supply our home with security lighting. Might take me a couple months to get that all working, but and then of course the next step will be to add some solar panels to the roof. But for now, you know, we lost power in the storm a few weeks ago, and it just felt ridiculous that I owned all these batteries and was sitting in the dark. I want to be the only house in this neighborhood that's lit up when the power goes out.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what I do in my house. I've been doing this for some time, a 36 kilowatt hour battery pack. So I use Georgia Power as my generator in my house. It's just a normal house, 2,000 square foot, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 car garage, standalone, pretty normal, 2 stories. And so I've got an array down at the in my backyard, and then all my equipment in my garage. So around 36 kilowatt hours battery pack. But then the first thing I always tell people to do is, you know, actually, I don't recommend people go solar first thing at all. And I know I work in the solar industry, and I know this might sound really counter. The first thing I recommend people to do, and that's true in any engineering thing, is understand what the situation is right now. You know, putting on a bunch of solar panels is not going to fix anything, right? So I like people to kind of, Georgia Power had a program where you could audit. So audit. First thing you should always do is audit exactly where is your consumption, and you'll find that you can reduce a lot of your consumption just by putting more insulation. I did spray foam in my attic, which was fantastic. Georgia Power had a program when I did this many years ago, and they paid for around, you know, a good $800 of it. Spray foam in the attic, new low E windows. I tightened up the envelope, replaced my HVAC system, got my consumption down first, and then I put solar. So that's basically what I recommend people, is that, you know, solar is not here to fix your problem. Batteries are not here to fix your problem. First, understand what your problem is. So, yeah.
Yeah. Tomorrow on my radio show, which we pre-recorded, actually, we actually did it on Zoom. We each had our recorder, and we watched each other on Zoom with a headphone, recorded separate audio tracks, sent it to the station. They overlaid the tracks, merged them together, and we're going through every letter of the alphabet tomorrow morning, from A to Z, with different energy concepts for each letter. And the very first one, A, is audit.
Audit. Audit.
So we're right on track. Yeah. So if you guys want to listen in to WGAUradio.com in the morning, you can hear Casey and I go through the alphabet and have fun. Well, look, we're at the end of our hour on a Friday afternoon. Got some great stuff. Becky, thanks for that website. I've already pulled it up, the Roanoke Electric, and I've got the one on green power. And let's try to have James Marlowe on our next call, Julian, and talk further about microgrids. I know that the Jekyll Island Authority is wanting to have the Sea Turtle Center as a microgrid for resiliency purposes. They have 19 swimming pool pumps running 19 little individual pools of turtles. And when they lose power, they have to eventually move all those turtles because they have to have those tanks, I guess, with the pumps running and everything to provide for the health of the turtles. And we're actually trying to get Georgia Power to provide, part of the in a container, not solar, but just batteries there that would run that Sea Turtle Center in case of power outage. So we'll see how that goes. Anybody else have anything today before we adjourn our call?
I was just going to say next week, Tuesday or Friday, which is better for your schedule?
Yeah, it'll need to be Friday. We've got a Vogel hearing all day on Tuesday. So I will be tied up on Zoom listening to a Georgia Power testimony about Vogel next week. So Friday would be great.
I was gonna mention that I got in touch with the Sustainability Committee.
Oh, yeah.
On campus. Yeah, I talked to Jim, and I talked to my mentor, who is the chair of the Sustainability Committee. So he said it sounded like a great idea, that he liked where this was going. And she said she thought it was a great idea as well. And she gave me like a couple little maybe paths to kind of like take and investigate. They said the Sustainability Committee has like broke off for this year, this term or whatever, and they're not going to be like coming back together until September, like the start of fall, the new school year. But gave me some advice, like as far as getting in touch with like residents, student living, and maybe talking to them. She said that they did have a zip car thing set up there at one point in time, that it wasn't there anymore. There's no more zip cars in Lawrenceville now for them. And to maybe like get in touch, I thought of maybe doing like a survey monkey for the student housing, maybe, to see like, how do you have transportation? If this was like an option for you, would you use it, type of thing. And just kind of like, I think I need to get all my ducks in a row in order to take this to them, I guess, in September, perhaps. And she also mentioned that the administration tends to favor student projects and stuff like that more over like their great ideas, is what she said. Like they tend to like not listen to our great ideas as much, but they listen to like students and their projects. So now I'm trying to figure out, how can I turn this into a student project that makes a program? I don't know, but that's how much I got so far.
Well, I want to make this offer to you. I have a little small low-speed electric vehicle enclosed with doors. You may have seen a photo of it. It's wrapped with sea turtles. Okay, speaking of sea turtles, it's got a tag on it. It's fully insured. I'd like to offer that to you for orientation in the fall. Mm-hmm. So if you put together a student survey, you could, and you got permission, I'll have my car hauled over to Georgia Gwinnett. You could take a team of students and do, at the dorms, you could do, instead of Survey Monkey, you could actually do live surveying from my cool little car, which is fully electric with a solar panel on top, right? And you could kind of see what students were thinking as they looked at the car. So you could have a team that went around and you guys could maybe you gave free water, or we could fill up the back with water. I mean, let's think about something cool that you could do on campus with permission, utilizing my little electric car that you could. I won't even have to be there. I'll just give it to you, and you can have it for the week. And that would be a really, I think, fun thing for you to do on us as you kind of put together this plan.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I'm getting excited about doing it. I was glad to hear that they were like on board with it, like it's a possibility. Maybe because I don't know what the limits are with students and campus and school and making programs and stuff. I didn't think students can go and like talk to people and make a program or anything, but I don't know. We'll see how it works. Yeah, there's
Great.
definitely that's a good thing.
Great. Does
I guess
anyone have
that's
anything?
my little.
Anyone have anything else for the good of the order today?
2 quick things. First, I just posted a photo of the car that I just found online. And also, Sol, are you going to get in touch with your friends at Saudi Aramco and tell them to stop producing so much oil?
I think they're already doing that now, right?
You got to call them next time.
Hey, market economics. Demand is down, production gets down.
I don't know. They are producing a lot of oil. They're not following the rules of efficient markets.
Okay.
So I sent a message to Jamie earlier that last semester I wrote a paper about the Georgia Power microgrid community in Alabama, and they have one here in Atlanta as well. It was probably one of my favorite papers, utility papers. I think Dr. Brown is trying to publish it, but anyway, it's everything. They have it was smart building, they have net metering, they have battery storage, everything.
Wow.
Yeah, that microgrid project, Jamie, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one out at the Pulte townhome.
Yes, it is. And part of that was part of the energy efficiency rebates out of the program, but it went into renewables and other things. But we have toured it, right? Were you there, Commissioner, when we toured that site?
Yes, I was there for the ribbon cutting and the tour.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, great. Was there anything else, Becky, that you needed to say?
No, sir.
Okay. Somebody's asking about my radio show site, and there it is, just wgauradio.com, and you can just click listen live, and you can hear it from anywhere. And then all the back episodes of the show, all 68 of them, are there under on demand. So in the menu, if you just click on demand, you'll see Energy Matters, and you can go to any of the shows. It gives a description of what we've talked about. So, well, Julian, thanks again for your leadership and lining everything up today. And we'll look forward to getting James Marlowe, hopefully, or Jamie Porges. Jamie's one of the smartest guys I know, and getting them on the call with us next week.
Yep, I met him once many years ago, so good excuse to get reintroduced. Note to everybody, I'll be posting this online at my personal webpage, energy101.com. Takes a while to upload, but sometime this evening you'll be able to see this and last week's recording. And again, that web space is relatively private, so unless you know that address, you're not going to find it online.
Yeah. Okay, y'all, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.